Hi there. Welcome to Personalization Point Episode 11, How to Ensure Your SDRs Don't Over-Research and Spend 5 Minutes Picking 3 Personalized Premises. My name is Becc Holland. I'm the CEO and founder of Flip the Script. Before we jump in, if you do me a big favor, go to flipthescript.co and make sure that you download the deck for the session so you can follow along in each step of the way. Once you've done that, let's go ahead and jump on in. So full disclosure, I'm going to briefly cover the buckets here, but if you want to know more about the things that you can personalize on, go into Personalization at Scale, which is in the core sessions, where I go much more deep into the different premises that you can pick. But just as a brief review, there are 5 different buckets of things that you can, types of premises you can personalize on. I start with the highest likelihood for trigger rate for a response rate, and go down in descending fashion. So you want to try and stay in buckets 1, 2, or 3 if you can, because you're going to enhance your chance for a response. But let's dive in here. So bucket number 1 is going to be self-authored content. So this is anything that your prospect authored, whether that's an article that they wrote, whether that's a post that they shared on LinkedIn, or that's a webinar that they were a part of, but this is something that the prospect actually authored themselves. And so if I had to guess why they'll respond, is because anyone who creates any kind of content, it's really, really easy to be the critic. It's really, really tough to be the creator. And so someone who does some kind of a level of content, or I'll speak from my own experience, you're looking for that level of validation. So social media is really predicated on this. If whenever someone makes a post, they're looking for likes, they're looking for shares, they're looking for comments, because they crave validation that whatever they did was really relevant to someone. So this is going to be your highest trigger rate or response rate. I need to stop using the word trigger. But essentially, whenever you're looking to pick out a premise, you need to do 2 things. Number 1, think it through in terms of not what is a personalized premise to this person, but what is a personalized premise that I can then hook back to my value prop. So, you want to be very careful of the 10-80-10 rule, where 10 is personalized, 80% isn't, and 10% is. I think it gives the prospect a feeling that you are disgenuine in what you picked out and that you did it only to get a response. So you want to tease out some kind of personalized premise that you can then hook back to your value prop. So when you're going through someone's profile, be in that mindset of, I want to pick out something that matters to them and also is relatable to what I do as a company. But number 2, you want to be sure to tease out not only a summary, but also an excerpt. So in the case of an article or a webinar, you'll have a title, and I would use that as my summary. But if for something like a profile line, then I would say you're going to need this, to summarize the words and paraphrase the words, because you don't have a title. So the first bucket, in review, is going to be self-authored content, anything that your prospect authored themselves. So that's articles that they wrote, posts that they wrote, or webinars that they were a part of, and that's going to be your first bucket and most likely to get a response. Bucket number 2, engaged content. That's anything that they engaged with but didn't author themselves. So liked, shared, commented on, pretty straightforward, but they didn't actually create the content themselves. So going to be a little less response rate, but still really good. Bucket number 3 is going to be self-identified traits. So that's going to be company line, profile line, or headline. So just to give you a quick snap here on the screen, I'm going to use Manny as one of the examples today. Manny Medina, he's the CEO of Outreach, and I'm a general fangirl of his. But essentially, your headline is going to be up here of what he's communicating that he actually does, within the headline here. So a lot of people, instead of putting their title, they put something that their company does here. The profile line is going to be the About Me section, so right here. And then the company line is going to be down here. So a lot of times, instead of talking about what the company does, people will talk about what they did at the company. So the self-identified traits in review is headline, which is going to be here in the profile, the profile line, which is going to be the About section, and then the company line, which is going to be the third one. But these are going to be anything that the prospect said about themselves that you can then relate, or the work that they do that you can then relate back into what your company does. And then buckets 4 and 5, number 4 is going to be junk drawer. So that's going to be any non-related non-work related topic that you could then relate back to your company. So this is going to be, anything from personal interests to hobbies to schools attended, to mutual connections or recommendations. Those are a little more work related, but they're a little more side topic-y, I would say. And so this is going to be something that you are going to be really creative with. So full disclosure, a lot of different ICPs or buyer personas love this. Some of them really don't like it. So, you need to make this decision dependent on who you're selling into. In my experience, at least, marketers really like this. HR really likes this. Sales leaders, about half of them love it, about half of them don't like it at all. SDR leaders really, really like this, but this is going to be anything non-really work-related that's kind of fun, more fun and gimmicky. But again, you need to keep in mind that you're going to be relating this back to your value prop, so choose wisely. So if you're talking about how someone loves, how I love Taylor Swift, you need to be ready to justify how your product relates to my love for Taylor Swift. So I certainly don't have the temerity to tell you how to do that or how to relate it back to you, but those are the rules of the game. And then bucket number 5 is going to be company level data. So since this is firmographic, this is going to be the lowest response rate. My advice here is the more detailed, but the more brief you can be, the better. So you're talking to a decision maker, you need to have brevity, but you also need to trigger to them or signify to them that you essentially are doing your research. So because people have tried to mask something that is not personalized for something that is, you'll see a lot of different emails, for instance, like, I notice your company is growing, or my CEO sent me your way, or your profile is very interesting. But people, the great thing about our prospects is they're really, really smart. So they can tell usually if something was actually to them or whether it was a generic blast. So there's nothing worse than a look-alike or a something that's faking to be something that it's not. It's not really genuinely, whatever it is that you're talking about. And so if you're doing personalization, you want to make sure within this company bracket, it's very, very easy to say, like, I noticed that your company grew, even when you are personalizing, but that doesn't communicate to your prospect necessarily that you know them. The difference between, I noticed that your company grew 17% and just added a VP of sales and 20 new employees, congratulations, versus I noticed your company is growing. One, I'm very, very sure that you're personalizing to me. One, I'm not so sure. So, again, this is the bucket that you want to use if you can't find anything in buckets 1 through 3. Buckets 1 through 3 usually account for 80 to 85% of the premises that I'm sending over. I am pushing the reps that I've worked with to get in those first 3 buckets. It's harder to do, but it's much more successful. So bucket 4 is going to be a tailing off rate, and then 5 is, it's better than no personalization, but it's it's going to be the lowest response rate. So let's go ahead and jump in here into how you can scale this within outreach, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples. But essentially, one of the main things that you want to think about with your reps is, the title of the session. How do they not over-research? So I think one of the big fears in personalizing is that people spend too much time, researching. So, and I'll give you an example of why I think this is happening. Part of it is you want to go ahead and dig in and figure out who the person is. But the other part is that they're nervous. Making cold calls is really tough. Calling someone out of the blue and trying to strike a rapport is not exactly the most fun job in the world. And so a lot of reps, at least that I've seen in the past, or I'll only speak for myself, I have oftentimes hid behind researching so that I didn't have to call someone. I've sat in a booth for 45 minutes doing every piece of research that I can, because it's really, really hard to actually pull the trigger and go ahead and make the call. So we want to make sure that we enable our reps to personalize, because that is very, very at the bedrock of them being successful. But we also want to make sure that we have our activity metrics in the right realm. And so part of what I wanted to achieve, in the nascent stages, I thought, okay, now I know how to personalize. I've put a structure around it and I've really put an ambit of direction. But how do I really scale this thing? So I did quite a bit of research on average activity metrics for reps in the industry. One of the stats that really stood out to me was Trish Bertuzzi, who I absolutely love, and Bridge Group did a report on average activity metrics. And the average activity metric per SDR is going to be 52 dials per day. So I knew at this point, okay, I'm going to need to hit 52 dials to say that I've effectively scaled something. So the things that I had been running into as a rep whenever I was looking to research but also scale something is, number one, how do I put the infrastructure of the personalized premises within some kind of sales engagement platform? And then number two, how do I ensure that my reps are not researching twice? So, it's really hard if you're calling 30 people a day to keep all of that research correct in your mind. And I had oftentimes seen people go into Google Sheets. They'd say, okay, I'm going to put all this great information into Google Sheets. And something I'd run into as a rep and saw my teams running into is, our connect rates are 3 or 4 per day out of, people on average are calling 52 people and they're getting 3 to 4 connects. And so it kind of shocks the rep whenever someone picks up. And so they're not expecting that to happen. And if they're within a sales engagement platform, then they have to shuffle over to different tabs to find that research. And so because we were using personalization at the very beginning of the conversation, if you want to know where to intertwine it, go to, again, personalization at scale. And I talk about how to do that in cold calls. But right off the bat, we were saying, hi, this is Becc calling on a recorded line with Flip the Script. How have you been? The person says, who is this? I say, great question. Reason for my outreach is, and that's where I was personalizing. So I needed it at the very beginning of the conversation. So, back when I was at a marketing organization, essentially, I reached out to outreach and I said, hey, I have an idea. I need to trim out the work of double researching and triple researching beforehand, and I need to make sure that my reps are structuring even the kind of premises that they are thinking about personalizing on. And so outreach was absolutely amazing. I got to work with their team. Shout out Danny Kish, who was on their CSM team, who is absolutely lethal. But he really sat down with me and Manny and said, hey, we value personalization. How can we leverage sales engagement, to do this? So to all the people out there who think, and I was one of them, of hey, sales engagement might be the enemy. They've essentially, yes, they've sped us up, but they have enabled people to mass blast. They are certainly not the enemy. Outreach was absolutely amazing in working with me to help me iron in this infrastructure. So without further ado, before I nerd out anymore on outreach, why don't we go ahead and jump in? The first thing that you want to do in here is you want to make sure that you iron into your custom tags all of the personalization premises that you can do. So if you go over here, if you're an admin for your profile, outreach profile, for instance, if you go over here and you click on your name and you hit settings, and you go to the prospect view, then within 7 minutes, I have timed myself. I actually did it in 4 this time, but I usually say 7 as a full disclosure. You can iron in all of these custom tags to reflect the kinds of premises that you can do outreach in. So, let's start at the top here, but I basically named them by bucket. So for instance, Flip the Script bucket 1, article title, Flip the Script bucket 1, article excerpt. FTS bucket 1, webinar title, webinar excerpt. And then post summary and post excerpt. So that's all of bucket 1. Again, we said our 3 premises were post, article, and webinar, and we want to make sure that we give room for the title and the excerpt here. Bucket 2 is, I started with shares, the shared post author. So let's say I shared Manny's post, for instance. Then I would put Manny was the author of that post, and the summary was scaling teams effectively, and then shared post excerpt. Commented on post author and summary, and then commented on excerpt. So this would basically, you would say, reason for my outreach is I noticed that you commented on Manny's post on scaling teams effectively. Your comment where you said X would be the excerpt here. And then the last piece of engaged content is liked. So liked post author. So I noticed that you liked Manny's post on scaling teams effectively. One line that stood out to me was X about that post. So that's bucket 2, is liked, commented on, and shared. And you need to put 2 lines, one for the summary and one for the excerpt. Bucket number 3, we're going to start with about me section. So again, this is profile line. but you want to iron in here FTS bucket 3, about me, section summary, about me excerpt, headline summary, headline excerpt, and then company line summary, company line excerpt. So that's bucket 3, self-identified traits. So profile line in their about me, headline, and their company line. And you can create each one of these as a custom tag. FTS bucket 4, schools attended. You won't need an excerpt there. Personal interests, hobby, recommendations, or skill endorsements, or mutual connections. So these are all one-liners because you essentially, if you want to know, in these first 3 buckets, you are hooking your relevance or value prop in the second line of the email to the words of the prospect. So to learn how to do that, go to how to hook personalization and relevance at season 2, episode 1. But there are some cases where you don't have an actual excerpt. You don't have words of the prospect. So in that case scenario, in the second part of that session, season 2, episode 1, again, how to hook personalization to relevance, I go into how do you hook whenever you don't actually have their words. There's 2 case scenarios. I have their words, because I'm talking about a webinar, or I don't have their words, and how do I hook in both case scenarios. So if you go to that session, I go in depth on how to hook that to relevance. But bucket number 4 is comprehensive, or made up of a bunch of different premises that you essentially would not have an excerpt. So just a side note there, but schools attended, personal interests, hobby, recommendations, skill endorsements, mutual connections. And then bucket 5 is going to be the about us, is going to be company level data. So the about us on the company page summary, the about us excerpt, website language summary. So the website of, the company that they work for, and then the website excerpt, a post of their company, on their LinkedIn page, and a post excerpt, M&A details, merger and acquisition. That you won't need an excerpt, blog post summary, blog post excerpt, and then hiring details. But essentially, outreach, there are a number of custom fields here. So if you say like, hey, Becc, there's actually another thing you can personalize on. Number 1, I'm not mad. Number 2, do me 2 favors. Number 1, iron it into all these Delta extra custom fields you can use in outreach if you're using them. And number 2, I would love it if you would ping me. If you have an idea of something that you could personalize on that you don't see in here, then I would love to hear your ideas. I certainly am not, the creator in all cases. So if you do have an idea and you don't see something here, feel free to reach out to me. This is a building effort. But essentially, this is how you iron it into your custom fields here within outreach. It's super quick. Again, it took me 4 minutes. It should take you no longer than 7. And once you hit save, now on every single person that you go to, and so I'm going to use Manny as a prospect here, for instance, that I've loaded in here. Manny, whenever I hit edit on his profile, they're all ironed in here for me. So I think that's the biggest lump for people, is they want to know where to put it. So I would not be, I would certainly not say like, hey, here's the note section, and they should just put these notes in here. I would structure as much as you can, especially if you're a sales or SDR leader. You want to take the brute of structure off of them and automation off of them as much as you can, so that they use all their calories on being creative. So, again, I hit save, and now all of these are sitting in here for any single prospect that I have. And so you enable reps to say like, hey, here's how you personalize and here's how you store it. So essentially once I hit save, I don't have to research again. So, let's go into a few examples here. I queued up, I know that you're seeing, that this is real because you're seeing these notifications come up over here on my LinkedIn. But I'm going to use 3 different profiles of people that I would personalize on. I'm going to use Manny Medina, who's the CEO of Outreach, David Cancel, who is the CEO of Drift, and John Dick, who is the VP of Marketing over at HubSpot. All 3 amazing. All 3 I've gotten to, talk back and forth with and collaborate, and just really, really great guys in the industry. So let's go ahead and jump in. So I'm going to go to Manny's profile, and I'm doing this ad hoc, meaning I have not looked at his profile before and, learn how to do this. So I'm going to show you as if I'm doing it for the first time. So the first bucket that I'm looking for, I came to Manny's page on LinkedIn here, and the first bucket that I'm going to be looking for, again, is going to be self-authored content. So I can go into this all activity portion on LinkedIn, and self-authored content is going to be either articles that he's written, or that's going to be posts that he has made. So, our webinars will often be posted in here. There's not a separate section for webinars, but so you can scroll through and say like, okay, what are all the posts that Manny has made? And how can I relate that back to what I'm doing as a company? So I'm going to use Flip the Script, for instance, of who I'm going to be selling in this case scenario. So Flip the Script, part of the business is a consulting business on how to make, sellers better, SDRs better, and the funnel better overall. So I'd be scrolling through here with that in my mind, and I would probably hit this post 3 weeks ago where he said, where outreach wouldn't be where it is today without deep and meaningful relationships we've built. And I would say my hook would probably be, what if you could ensure all of your reps were building meaningful relationships with your prospects and you were booking more meetings and closing more deals as a result. So I would scroll over into here, and again, I just went over into his prospect view, and I said, okay, I'm looking for Manny in outreach. I'm going to pull him up. Yes, I did put that his email address is mannyisdope@outreach.io. Yes, I am a dork. So I would come over here for the post summary. Here's the post excerpt, and I would copy it in here. And I would say the post summary is meaningful, full relationships. And then I would say, I am, full disclosure, for all of the sequences that I'm doing, I am doing 5 emails per sequence, regardless of the source of attribution. And we can get into sequences. If you go over into the 7 sequences that nobody is using, but you should be, I go a little bit deeper, but out of those 5 emails, 3 of them, I'm garnering personalized premises. So I would say, okay, that's one that I'm going to use. Why don't I go back into posts or articles? I'm sorry. So articles, I would say, okay, what are the articles that he's writing? Oh, why SDRs are so villainized. This is probably going to be a good one. So I would scroll through and I would say, okay, this is the title of the article that I'm going to use. I'm sure that I can do something there, hook something there. So I'd say, okay, the article title is Why Are SDRs So Villainized? And I would cut and paste it in there. And then I would look for some excerpt that I can, link back to what Flip the Script does or how we, make salespeople better. So this is going to be a good quote. So I'd say, okay, remind the SDR that rejection and pushback is part of the job. So I would come in here and I would say, okay, I'm going to copy and paste this in. That's the excerpt that I'm going to use, and then I need one more. So that is the posts and self-authored content. Let's go into engaged content. So self-authored, again, is going to be anything he wrote, so that's articles and posts. And then let's say, just so I can display it, let's say that you couldn't find anything in articles and posts that your prospect did. The second bucket that you want to find is engaged content. So I'd go through here and say, if you hit all activity, this is going to give you not only the posts that Manny did, but all of the likes, shares, and comments that he's making. So I'm going to look for something that he didn't author. Oh, this is a great, I would use this first one, of like, hey, hey Manny, I loved this like on Janae Hall's post, who's the director of Mind Body. I'm going to click on this article and say, I'm going to tease out the article title here, and I'm going to take out the title and come down here into outreach, into bucket number 2, and say, he shared this post. So I'm going to say, I loved that you shared Janae Hall's post on, and I gave the summary or the article title here. So I'd say Janae Hall plus, and then I would put quotes around the article title so that I didn't get confused. And I would say, here's his comment. So I'm going, or actually I'm going to do this for commented. So I'm going to put his comment in here, and I'm going to clip this and say I'm going to do this on as a commented on post. So your hook here would be, hi Manny, a reason for my outreach is I noticed that you commented on Janae Hall's post on article, why caring for others can be the thing that grows your career the most. And I loved your comment when you said, this is awesome, congrats, where you're rooting her on. What if you could ensure that all of your reps over at Outreach were caring for your prospects whenever they were doing cold outreach, building more rapport as a result, and booking more meetings with them on the back of that. So those are my 3 premises that I would use. Again, this is ad hoc, so I'm doing this live. But my first one in review was going to be, hi Manny, reason for my outreach is I loved your post on meaningful relationships. One line that stood out to me was, outreach wouldn't be where it is without deep and meaningful relationships we've built. The second one that I would use is, hi Manny, reason for my outreach is I loved your article on why SDRs are so villainized. The one quote that stood out to me is, remind the SDR that rejection and pushback is part of the job. And then the third one would be, hi Manny, reason for my outreach is I took a look, or I noticed that you made a comment on Janae Hall's article, why caring for others can be the one thing that grows your career the most, especially when you're rooting her on with, this is awesome. What if you can ensure your reps over at Outreach were caring for your prospects on the line and booking more meetings as a result? So those are the three personalization premises that I'd use. I stored them all here in the custom fields, and then I would hit save. So the great thing about this is there's actually 2 great things. Number one, Outreach does not populate, they do not put empty buckets up here. They essentially only populate up here the buckets that you have filled in. So it won't be confusing to the reps, and your reps, and you won't have to scroll down. So essentially, whenever Manny, picks up the phone, if I call him time 1 or time, 80, then it will be sitting here. All 3 of these premises will be sitting here at the click of a button so that I can know where I'm going in the conversation. But the second great thing about this is, like I mentioned, most prospects don't pick up on the first dial. So if to all the cold callers out there, my heart goes out to you, but most people don't pick up on the first dial. Usually it's, anywhere from, I've seen research upwards of 5 to 15 touches that you have to get a hold of them. So you want to make sure that they're not having to research twice here. So the great thing is, no matter what happens, meaning I call Manny and he doesn't pick up the first 4 times, I don't have to double research. So essentially the first step of the sequence is when I'm sourcing all of these personalized premises. It took me, it will take me just a couple of minutes to do that, and then I'm rolling in my day. So that's Manny. Why don't we go into a couple more examples just so you can see how this works. So the second one I'm going to use is David Cancel. He's the CEO of Drift, and I'm going to pull him up. And again, I have not gone to his profile, so we'll see how this goes. You can hit your timer and see how I do. So I would say, okay, I'm going to hit edit here for David. I'm going to go to his profile. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to his see all bucket. I'm going to see if there's any articles that he wrote that I could then relate back to what I'm doing. Oh, there's a lot of good things in here. I'm going to go into this. Want to grow your career, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So this I can probably relate to the growth that I could push on his sales team, if he were to hire me as a consultant. So I'd say, okay, this is my first premise. I'm going to come in here, and put this as my article title. I'm then going to come back here and find an excerpt. Say, oh, I love this. You're either growing or you're dying. If you linger, there's no sitting still. I'm going to probably use this quote. There's no sitting still. So I would say, like, hey, David, reason for my outreach is I saw your article where you wrote, want to grow in your career, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. One line that really stood out to me was, there's no sitting still. What if you could ensure that all of your reps over at Drift were not sitting still, so to speak, growing with every conversation to the next one in terms of their skill level on the phone, and booking more meetings as a result. So that would be the first one that I would use. And I'd say, okay, I'm going to do one more just so I can I can show y'all how this works. Hey, David, I saw your article that you wrote on avoiding shiny objects, or a webinar. We can put it in here, post summary. Oh, I love this quote. This means that we're all constantly being bombarded by new ideas, one that always sounds better, more compelling, and easier than just continuing to do what we know has worked. So I'd say, what if you could ensure that you are only deploying the ideas, the shiny new ideas that actually worked on your cold calls with your prospects, with your reps, so you could double down on what's working, and eliminate the bad practices with your reps on the phone. So that's another great example. So I'd hit save here with David, and I now have, and I think that took me 2.5 minutes to understand 2 premises that I can use. That now, if he picked up, ring, ring, this is David, I'd say, hey, David, this is Becc Holland on our quarter line. We'd flip the script. How have you been? He'd go, who is this? And I'd say, it's me, Becc. Don't you know me? Just kidding. I would say, you wrote this article. I love that you wrote this article where you said, want to grow in your career, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. One line that really was stunning to me was when you said there was no sitting still. So I was curious to know if you've come across flip the script before. So that would be David. And then I want to finish off here with John Dick, the amazing VP of marketing over at HubSpot. Shout out, John. I did want to mention of note here for David. I put that his email address is davidisawesome@beckisaSuckup.com. So let's go to John as our third example here. John, I want to pull him up. I put his email as johnisdeadly@beckreallyneedstostopbeingassuckup.com. But John, I would say, okay, I'm going to go to his profile here. I'm going to see what he posted. So I'll start there. I still can't... Oh, here's a great one. Being able to structure your data correctly is everything. What if you could learn how to structure personalization, enable your reps to personalize at scale with their prospects, and drive more meetings as a result? That's the angle that I would go. And so the premise here of his post, again, I'm going to go into the custom tags here and say, here's the excerpt, but the premise of the post summary was HubSpot custom objects and the sales community. So that is the summary, and here's the excerpt that I'm going to use. So I want to quickly here go into, for all the people who are sitting out there saying, well, what if I don't sell into a marketing ICP or a sales ICP? Why don't I run through on John's profile where I would go if John didn't have the first bucket? So again, I'm going to start here with the articles, see if he's written any articles. Then I'm going to go to posts, see if there's any posts, that he's done that I could then hook back to what my company does. This is one that I would have used probably about, a puzzle, and say, what if you could piece together the pieces of the puzzle of what makes a good cold call? I would get kind of corny, but again, that's all self-authored content. If I can't find it self-authored content, which is bucket number 1, bucket number 2, I go into all activity, which is anything that John liked, shared, or commented on. And you can scroll through here and say, is there anything that I can use that that he's doing or he is liking that I could then relate back to my product? If I can't find anything there, I would come back to John's profile and say, okay, I'm going to look at his headline, which is just this title, so we can't use that. His profile line, so I look through here and say, like, okay, is there anything I can use here? I would take this, for instance. I take an analytical but fun approach to marketing, and I would say I could use that. So I'd come in here and I'd flip the script bucket 3, the About Me section, and I would put the excerpt, and I would say, fun marketing is the summary, and the excerpt is, I take an analytical but fun approach to marketing, and I would say, what if you could ensure all of your reps over at HubSpot were taking a fun but creative process to their cold calls? So you could impress your prospects right off the bat, build rapport with them by knowing who they are, and book more meetings as a result. So that is a second premise that I could use for him. But point being, if I can't find anything within buckets 1 and 2, which is self-authored content or engaged content, I would come to his headline here. I then come to his profile line and his About Me section. This is actually a gold mine, just for anyone listening out there. This is a gold mine of very quickly how to personalize. So everyone usually has an About Me section. And the great thing about Me sections is they're typically using, they're using some kind of positive talk about what they do or what they focus on or what they really like, which is great because it's hard to get our prospects to talk about that data because they're scared that we're going to pitch them. So this is a great, which is what we're essentially doing. So this is a great place to say like, okay, where is John giving me any level of data about himself, so that I can, hook this back in. But this is a low hanging fruit, especially if you're selling into an ICP that, or an ICT that does not, by definition, they aren't really active on LinkedIn. So if they're not active on LinkedIn, they still set up a profile. Most people are on LinkedIn. I've sold into CFOs, I've sold into building managers, I've sold into, maintenance directors, I've sold into teachers, etc. So, most people have created some level of profile. And if they've created a profile at the beginning, LinkedIn urges you to create an About Me section because it helps people engage with you. So usually this is filled in, even if they're not super active. But the last piece of identified traits would be here in the company line. So, you'll see, for instance, when John was at Trunk Club, that he talked about a little bit about what he did as opposed to what Trunk Club did. Very, very common. And I think it actually is helpful. If I wanted to know what Trunk Club did, I could just click on their logo here. But you could say like, hey, reason for my outreach is I noticed that you owned a profitable, online funnel driven by search and social. And if you are selling something that has to do with SEO or search and social, then this would be the place to hook it. But point being, bucket 3 is going to be the headline, the profile line, and the About Me section, and then the company line here. And then if I can't find anything in bucket 3, I'm then going to go to bucket 4, which is the junk drawer. So junk drawer, place where you can find a lot of it. Number 1, schools attended. Obviously, you can talk about a school. Dude went to Harvard, so shout out John. He's probably pretty smart. And went to University of Oxford for physics. So you could start brainstorming about how you could relate physics, back to what your company does. Like, I noticed that you went to University of Oxford and you studied physics. What if you could diagnose or understand the chemical properties of a cold call? What makes them successful, and so you could get your reps to improve. I mean, bad example, but I'm doing it on the fly. Not necessarily a great example, but because I don't understand physics, full disclosure, even though my mom was a biology teacher, science was my weakest subject. But anywho, you could come down here to the schools that he attended or the subjects that he focused on. You could come down in here and say, like, what are his personal interests? Are there people that he's interested in? Or companies that he's interested in that I could then relate back to what I'm doing as a company. You could come down here and say, okay, I'm going to look at these recommendations that people have written for him. Is like, here's a great example. John is a talented marketer with an eye for detail. What if you could have a quick and easy eye for detail on what is working on cold calls for your reps, and help them drive more conversion as a result. And then you can say, like, is there anything interesting? So like here, for instance, a lot of people do put interest in here. He has a decade of improv, sketch, and sketch comedy performance, so that's really interesting. He was in comedy beforehand. So I'd say like, hey, John, reason for my outreach is I noticed that you did sketch comedy performance, and you focus on comedy for a decade. What if you could ensure that your reps are getting your prospects to laugh, building rapport through that, and they are crying so hard because they're laughing, not crying so hard because the cold call went so poorly, and driving more, close won meetings as a result. It's kind of a cheesy thing, but, again, there's going to be certain kinds of ICPs that really, really like this creativity. Marketers are a great example because they are on the DISC scale. For anyone who's familiar with the DISC scale, they're a high I. So they think, creatively quite a bit. And that's kind of their capital as a marketer. That's how they're measured, is how creative they are and different they are. And so they're going to like those kind of, pieces of outreach when you can relate. How can I relate sketch comedy? How can I relate being funny back to, what we're doing what we're doing as a company. So that's great examples of junk drawer. And then if I can't find anything in those first 4 buckets, and again, this should be certainly the exception, not the rule. I can't find anything in the posts that John's written. I can't find anything in the articles that he's written. I can't, find anything in the activity that he's done. And I want to stop here and say something, because I think it's very important. Personalization is tough. As all good things are. It is very tough to personalize and consistently be creative. It's much easier to just hit a button. But we are at the point in the industry, I think, where we all realize that hitting a button doesn't work on us, doesn't work for us, so it doesn't work for us whenever we're prospecting into someone else. So I want to encourage people that I know that this is a little, it's certainly more effort than just hitting a button and sending out a template. But this is something, in my perspective or my experience with the 4 teams that I've done it with, that it increases their engagement, it increases their response rates, but it also helps your reps not feel like they're a button pusher. So one of the things that millennials really, really want, in their career is some level of, purpose with what they're doing. And so this is a great way to empower your reps through, enabling them to be creative within a certain direction. But I would always push people. I gave the analogy to my reps and they said it was a game changer for them. I don't know if anyone who's watching has seen the movie Armageddon, or I'm sorry, Apollo 13. I always confuse them. I love them both, but they're both good movies, both in space. But Apollo 13, there's one point where Tom Hanks, I don't know what his character's name is, he was in space. And essentially, the team on the ground, NASA, needed to figure out a way to build a filter to get them more oxygen out of the things that they had on the ship. So there's a scene where essentially the leader, of the team over at NASA, he's basically on the ground and he says he goes into a room with a team of people and he shakes out a bag of things. And he says, we need to build a filter. These are the things that they have on deck. How do we do it? So that's how I view personalization. These are all clues. There's no one that's going to have a profile that's going to say, hey, this is where you should personalize for me, or this is how you should hook it, or this is what you should talk to me about. But you need to view it, politely and respectfully as this is the bag. This is the bag of information that you have to work with. And one of the best, most effective pattern interrupts is going to be knowing who they are and proving that to them. So I'd always say buckets 1, 2, and 3, like that's where you want to lie. I'm going to go into bucket 5, but buckets 1, 2, and 3 is really where you want to focus because those are the most effective response rates. So I would not view it of like, oh, okay, I'm going to scroll here very quickly. Do they have an article that I can easily relate back into what I do? I mean, I just probably gave you 10 value props in the last 20 minutes off of just ad hoc, like me just looking at their profiles. But I would view it as I'm going to, for my own sake, stay in buckets 1, 2, and 3 because that's what's going to get me responses, or bucket 4 if I'm selling into, again, a marketing ICP, sales, or SDR ICP. But if I can't find anything there, then I'm going to rant over. Just know that this takes some work, but all good things do. Results really take some work. So the ROI is there. If I can't find anything in those first 4 buckets, then very quickly I can click on John's company and I can transition over to his about section for his company and say, like, what is HubSpot saying about themselves? Their leading growth platform with thousands of customers. Here would be a line that I would probably use. HubSpot gives companies the tools they need to grow better. What if your reps had the tools in terms of their cold calls and conversations to get better every single call, grow their revenue as a result, and book more meetings on the back end? So this is something that I could relate into there, but I would be scouring through of like, is there in their about section, in their home section, are they saying anything about themselves that I could use? If they are not, this is a low-hanging fruit if you can't find the first 4 buckets. But again, it's not going to work as effectively because what John's done is going to matter much more than what HubSpot has done because he's not the owner of it. But if I can't find anything there, then I'm going to come to HubSpot's website and say like, okay, what's the language on the website that I can use? Let's shake out the bottom of the bag, and make the best out of a quote unquote bad situation. Right here, here's one that I can use. There's a better way to grow, you know. So I would clip this, and again, I could come to John's profile in here, and I can hit edit and say, I'm going to scroll down here. We're in bucket 5, and come to bucket 5 and basically say the website summary is growing effectively. You're going to have to summarize in your own word, and then put the excerpt here, and then hit save. So when John picks up the phone, I say, hey, John, this is Becc Holland on a recorded line with Flip the Script. How have you been? He goes, who the heck are you? I say, good question. Reason for my outreach is I was on the HubSpot website earlier, and I was really taken back by your mission statement where you're talking about growing effectively. The one line that really stood out to me was when you guys said there's a better way to grow. So I was curious to know if you've come across Flip the Script before. So right off the bat, really personalization is the fancy pattern interrupt because no one's doing it. So a pattern interrupt, if you want to know more, then you're going to have to go over into the Silver Bullet Hub, but essentially Silver Bullet Central. But essentially, a pattern interrupt is something that most people aren't doing for the better, meaning it's something very, very positive that a lot of people aren't doing, so that you stand out and that you're different. Be sure you don't be silly, but you're doing something different. So that will catch John off guard. Even if I can't find something on John in specific, going into something that on the website, especially as a marketer, he probably was at the hands or the forefront of copywriting that. So I can use that here. But, so I would go to the website. If I can't find anything there for the website, then I'd say like, okay, is there any M&A details? Can I go to, Crunchbase for instance? And say like, okay, I'm going to go to Crunchbase here and understand like I'm going to come to HubSpot on Crunchbase and see what is the information here that I can gather. So how many investments do they have? They have 10. They have $100.5 million in funding. Big chunk of change. Who are their founders? Who are their investors? Were they acquired? Did they acquire? And can I relate any of this back to what our product does? So at any rate, you get the gist, but Crunchbase is a great way to understand like, okay, from the business perspective, is there anything that HubSpot has done recently, that would matter to John that also I can hook back into my value prop? Full disclosure, the things that matter to a company are typically going to matter the higher up the funnel you're hunting. The chain that you're hunting. So if I'm hunting into an individual contributor, or I'm hunting into, let's say, a SDR leader, or I'm hunting into a frontline manager, it's going to matter to them that an acquisition happened, but not nearly as much as someone who is, let's say, the senior vice president of revenue. Like that actually would tie more effectively to them. So I'd always evaluate, in these sessions, like, what is she saying? What is this person saying? And is that relevant to me? So if you're hunting individual contributors or you're hunting, lower down the funnel, then these kind of moves, company moves, are going to matter a little bit less. So I would try and focus on them. But, if you can't find anything in bucket 1 through 4, then, this is what you're going to need to transition to. This is the best way to get a response. So in summary, I know that personalization can seem tough and it can seem daunting, but I think that we have a great opportunity here. We have a great opportunity to really show the buying world what we're made of. We have an opportunity to bring integrity back into selling by knowing who our prospect is and saying more relevant messaging than ever before so that we spend their time valuably. How you do that is part of its personalization, part of its relevance, part of its hooking it together. But I think that the real magic here is we can leverage tech more than ever before to speed that up by doing 2 things. Number 1, ironing some level of infrastructure into our sales engagement platform so that we can make it more of a game of science of how are we putting in these personalization premises. And then number 2, how do we speed that up to where we only have to do research once? So I am excited to see the impact on the community of us leading with personalization, doing our research, and really knowing our buyer from end to end. So that is everything. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. If you like this session, you want to hear more, you're already on the website, so go check some out. And if you really love this session and want to help a girl out, go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn, tag me in your top 2 takeaways so I know what you want to hear more of. But either way, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Watch out.